what's going on, everyone? How you guys doing today? My name is Matt Jarbo. This is $3 Theater, and this is not necessarily the kind of content I normally cover. But I wanted to talk a bit today about the announcement yesterday that Bad Robot, J.J. Abrams, and Katie McGrath, his wife, are going to be donating $10 million to anti-racist organizations, and why this is actually a pretty big deal and not at all the type of soy boy cuck virtue signaling you might have been hearing about it from a certain subsect of people here, at least on YouTube, and most definitely on Twitter. This is something that does actually make a fair amount of sense, and let's talk about it. Let's dive in. Let's check it out here. So, according to Variety, Bad Robot Productions and the Katie McGrath and J.J. Abrams Family Foundation announced charitable donations to a number of organizations committed to anti-racist agendas. In a statement posted on Instagram, they announced that they're going to pledge $10 million over a 5-year period to various organizations. And that's actually a pretty big factor right there. So it's not all the money up front. It's not all the money at one time. It's over a span of years. This is actually a good idea because it is looking to push things through structural changes. These changes take time. One of the bigger problems with all sorts of activism, be it online or offline, is that demand for instant gratification. That simply doesn't come, and it ultimately ends up fueling more fires than not. By pledging $10 million over 5 years, they're going to look to see where the money goes to make sure it's going to the right establishments, that it's going to the right places, and that it's being used for good effect. This is actually a solid business strategy, because then it would allow them to either continue supporting those organizations, as I'm sure they're going to be continuing to support them over the years, provided that there's actual change taking place or that the money is being used for its intended purposes. This is a solid concept, and this is one that more people probably should be thinking about when it comes to donations, especially sustained donations. A lot of times we just kind of want to cut one check and put it out there and then be done with it and go, this is it, this is where we find ourselves, and this is, you know, making the difference. When in reality, this kind of change takes a fair amount of time. Now, they do say here in this, I don't want to, this is the whole statement. We'll go through the whole statement because I don't agree with all of the wording, to be fair, but it does, but I still think I should be looking at it. So they say enough is enough. Enough police brutality, enough outsized privilege, enough polite conversation, enough white comfort, enough lopsided access, enough exhausting our friends and colleagues, enough being incurious, enough being unintentional, enough injustice, enough death, enough. Now, on many of those factors, I absolutely agree with them. I think that we should be saying enough is enough when it comes to police brutality. That is a factor that does happen. When you want to look at how the police should be trained, they are trained in more of a riot control type oppressive training situation versus training for actual de-escalation. There have been cases, I've actually covered this a long time ago, where an officer chose to not fire and kill a man who had a gun trained on him. In fact, used de-escalation tactics in order to get the suspect to disarm himself and turn himself in. And guess what happened? That officer was fired. That should have caused as big of a riot as, quite frankly, anything else, but it didn't, because it wasn't that, because people didn't pay attention. It didn't get them angry enough. Even though this guy was fired for trying to do the right thing and save a life, he was effectively fired for not killing this gentleman who had a gun trained on him. That is the world we live in, and that is part of the police brutality aspect of it. There's a big problem here. Now, a lot of people are taking issue with the white comfort. I don't care about that, to be honest with you. I'm 38 years old. I'm past really giving much of a crap about that particular line of dialogue. Is it cringe? Yeah, it's a little cringe. Could they have said it better? Yeah, they could have said it better. But what they're attempting to say is that white people do make up the vast majority of population in this country. Black people make up about 13% of our total population. We do have a much larger population of white people over black people. That is just a statistical fact. And you know what? It's that's what they're trying to talk about here, is that we don't pay attention to the struggles that are happening to them. We don't pay attention. That's the white comfort aspect of it. Now, that is true in some cases, and it's not true in other cases. It is a very nuanced topic and not one that you can really summarize in 3 words on an Instagram post. But they do go on here. They say, "We at Bad Robot are grateful for the many scholars, activists, organizers, and leaders fighting on the front lines of change in our systemically unjust country. It is that constellation of thinkers and doers who have the blueprint to a more perfect, fair, equitable, and kind union. In this fragile time, words matter. Listening is critical and investment is required. The centuries-long neglect and abuse of our Black brothers and sisters can only be addressed by scalable investment, a massive and thoughtful overhaul of tax policy, and one that effectively meets the needs of the many in this country and not just the few is long overdue." Now, what they basically mean on this particular front is obviously they are aiming it towards Black women and Black men in this country, but it's not just them. While they are focusing on that, it is really an all lives matter situation, especially when you're talking about the tax code and how the rich don't pay as much in taxes, at least on a federal level, and they get many tax breaks. And that doesn't end up trickling down to the lower class and to the lower economy and the middle class, which ends up needing it the most. The middle class in this country is shrinking. Everyone knows that. It has been for quite some time. But the lower class is not getting any better. And as a result of that, it does need systemic change in our tax code and how we approach this. This is basically what Bernie Sanders talks about, what Elizabeth Warren talks about, what the talking points Joe Biden took from people, the stuff that Trump tried to say when he first started running, but that's not the case anymore. Now, I will say I am not a fan of the term equity. I love the term equality. I'm all for the term equality, but equity is not something that I necessarily get behind. That's my own personal bias. Now, it says here that corporate and private philanthropy can never achieve the impact needed to address these systemic inequalities, but companies and individuals who are able must do what we can until our political leaders lead. And that in and of itself is a vastly true statement and one that does need to be broken down. So yes, corporate and private philanthropy is not going to ever fully solve anything. I mean, a lot of times people, like I mentioned earlier on, the type that are mad at J.J. Abrams for investing this money back in the community and into groups that they deem are going to be necessary to do it. They don't understand that corporate philanthropy is not going to end up solving everything. It's meant to kind of help maybe curb some of the problems, but it's not going to solve things. Systemic change happens within our government, which means that systemic change happens when we, the people, come together to vote the right people in who can then enact the right policies that benefit everybody. It's a whole rising tide raises all boats situation. And that's what he's more or less referring to here. But right now we're seeing all of this from a corporate side of things, and it does feel relatively hollow because all you get today was an 8-minute and 42-second blackout on Nickelodeon and Spotify and Quibi and a number of other companies all did it today, and it just kind of rings hollow because there's nothing behind it. This is different. Bad Robot and Katie McGrath and J.J. Abrams are putting up $10 million over 5 years, so $2 million a year, to help lead systemic change where they feel that is necessary. They are literally doing and not just saying. This is actually the exact opposite of a hollow gesture. It's unhollow. Anyway. Now it says, between Bad Robot, the Katie McGrath, and J.J. Abrams Family Foundation, we're committing an additional $10 million over 5 years to organizations and efforts committed to anti-racist agendas that close the gaps, lift the poor, and build a just America for all. We are humbled to announce initial investments of $200,000 to the following organizations. Now, before we look at that real quick, I do want to say here that when it comes to anti-racist agendas, I'm all for that. I think we have a lot of inequality in this country. I think we have a lot of issues in regards to prison reform and how predominantly more men and women of color are arrested and jailed over the same crimes that white people do. That is an actual fact. You can look it up. And that is something that needs to be addressed. We need to start doing a lot more reform, whether that's legalizing of marijuana and then getting all of those people on pot charges out of prison, provided it's a non-violent drug offense. Get all of them out of prison, and it saves so much money. The more equal our society is, the more everyone is contributing, the better off we all are. It's just, those are just numbers. That's reality. But the more that we are kept down, the more it hurts the rest of us while the rich do get richer. And this is something that a lot of people are afraid of changing right now. They are giving money to the Black Futures Lab, to Black Lives Matter LA, to the Community Coalition, Equal Justice Initiative, Know Your Rights Camp, and everything else right here. So this is what they're doing right off the bat. And again, a lot of people out there are probably going to disagree with my take on this, and that's entirely fine. This is not a one size fits all solution. This is a problem that we have in our society and our culture. When it comes to how we view race and racism in America, how we treat different races, how things work out in different ways for different people, it's never going to be fair across the board. And I think most people out there relatively get that. Most people out there fundamentally understand that they've either got a leg to stand on or they don't, and in a wide variety of different situations. But as we've seen over the span of the last few years, when it comes to police brutality, this kind of stuff is growing. And when it grows, it causes a lot of civil unrest, because eventually, imagine taking a Mentos, putting it in a 2-liter bottle of Coke and closing the lid. Eventually, it's going to burst from the pressure. And that is kind of what these riots are. They're just a pressure release, but they don't actually bring about any change. That's why I'm for the protests, but I'm absolutely fundamentally against the riots, because it does nothing but damage the cause. The cause is good. The cause is just. Do we want fewer violent cops? Yes. Do we want bad cops to be held accountable? Yes. Do we want cops to treat everybody as equal? 100% yes. And that is a lot of what J.J. Abrams is up to. People out there that are trying to sell you on the narrative that this is just, like I said, SJW soy boy cuck nonsense. These are people who don't understand the world. They isolate themselves away from everything. They deal in echo chambers here on YouTube, and that's where they live. That's where they spend their life. They don't actually talk to anybody. They don't actually have any real lived experiences. I don't want to use the term privileged, but it comes across that way. And it's something that they need. I don't want to say check. I hate that. I hate that terminology. It gets said to me all the time. I'm not a fan of it personally. I have my own lived experiences. They have their own lived experiences, but we don't have a lot of these same experiences that the people who are protesting have had. And that is something that we have to face as people. And we have to listen to them and their pain and their suffering. If I talk about when I was swatted and how I view it as attempted murder, people pay attention because it's something traumatic that happened to me that they haven't experienced. And they want to try to understand, sympathize, and empathize. A lot of times that's what happens. But when it comes to the situation involving black and brown people in this country and how there is a disproportionate, sense of injustice surrounding them, that is something that's worth looking into. And yes, I know there's people in the comment section that are going to say, but crime statistics say this. And the truth of the matter is, you are right. In those aspects, yes, you are correct. But that has a lot to do with the systemic problem of those neighborhoods, how they need funding, they need education, and they need help in order to pull themselves out of this particular situation and particular despair. That is where we find ourselves. And if these are the organizations that J.J. Abrams and his wife are funding, are going to help try to put money in those communities in order to help raise them up from where they are, I support that 100%, because I want everyone to be equal, to be happy, to be functional, to be financially secure, to be artistically, satiated. I want everyone to be able to have the same dreams and hopes and ideas that the rest of us have. I want education to be open so then people can go and get the education that they want in order to be able to pursue their dreams and their goals, because that's how we innovate in our society. That is how we grow in our society. The longer that we try to divide each other, the us versus them mentality, it doesn't do anything to benefit anybody. But the more we work together, we try to lift everybody up, at the end of the day, we all benefit from it. Look at our society over the span of the last couple hundred years. People have worked and worked and worked to build to where we are now, to where you can listen to me, a dumb idiot, talk to you through the internet. I didn't build any of this technology. I don't know how any of it works, truly, but I'm able to utilize it in order to spread a message. Rising tide raises all ships. So I do look forward to your thoughts. I look forward to your opinions, good or bad. Please tell me down in the comment section. I want to hear them. I will talk to you guys later. Have yourself a great day, and peace out.